Welcome to the Active Directory portion of our course. Now, I'm super excited to cover this part of the course because I think it's the most overlooked part of any course that's out there right now. Now, some courses are starting to touch on it, but a lot of them are failing to do so. And two, it's, as you're going to find out, one of the most important items to learn when it comes to ethical hacking. And three, a little bit biased, but internal/Active Directory pen testing is by far my favorite. It goes so deep, there's so many possibilities, and these questions that are going to come up, or this building a lab, everything that we're going to do in this section of the course is going to come up in an interview, and you're going to be ready to nail those sections because you're going to have a lot of these answers down. So I'm very, very excited to start covering this. So before we can do that, I do have a little bit of death by PowerPoint. We're probably going to do 2 to 3 videos. We'll keep them short as possible, but you have to understand what Active Directory is before we can go out and build Active Directory and then attack Active Directory. So let's get started. So what is Active Directory? Well, you could think of Active Directory as like a phone book. Okay, and this phone book stores all kinds of information. These information, you can think of them as objects, and that's something like a computer or a user or a printer. All these objects are stored in this phone book, and we call these directory services, and Active Directory is used by Windows. Now, chances are, if you've ever worked in a work environment, you've probably used Active Directory, and we'll cover that a little bit on the next slide as well. Think about logging in at your computer. You get to work, you log in at your computer, you probably have, a username and a password. And you log in with that username and password. But say maybe there's another computer, either in a different building or just in a different location, or maybe you have a laptop and you go to use that computer and you use the same username and password. And then when you sign into your email, use the same username and password. And it's because you're using something called Active Directory. So you can have just this one username and password, and you can authenticate around the network using these credentials. And now this authentication is going to be using something called Kerberos, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the course, and specifically how we can attack it. But for now, just know that authentication on Windows-based devices using Active Directory uses something called Kerberos, and they use tickets. So why Active Directory? Why is it so important? Well, Active Directory is the most commonly used identity management service in the world. Now, 95% of the Fortune 1000 companies use it in their networks. 95%. So let me break this down for you. Like when we do internal assessments, we do internal pen tests, never have I ever had an environment that I pen tested against that was not Active Directory. This is so important when it comes to interviewing, when it comes to real life experience. This is the bread and butter. Everything, as I said before, all these courses out there, they teach external, not a lot teach internal. This is really where the money is made. So being able to exploit an environment from the inside, super, super important. So again, with Active Directory, the nice thing too is we can exploit it without ever being an exploit available to us. So there doesn't have to be a patchable exploit in the environment. We could take advantage of what Active Directory does by default, what it's considered in some cases a feature, and exploit that. So we can abuse features, trusts, components. There's so many different things of Active Directory that we can abuse because they're features. That's a really nice thing as well. So it comes down, as you're going to see when we talk about defenses, it comes a lot down to policy. And a lot of policies are just not in place in environments, and internal assessments can be bloodbaths. When I talked a few videos ago about these external networks and them being fortified and that you're really not going to find your way in that easily, and then the internal network being like the inside of a house, you fortify the external, you fortify your outside of your house, but you really don't think about the locks on the inside. And that's what happens a lot of times with Active Directory. It can get messy very fast. So it's important to have this knowledge. It's important to understand how to attack it and what some of the common attacks are. And it's important to know what Active Directory is as a big overview. So we're going to cover what Active Directory is as an overview, and then we're going to dive into building our lab and we'll dive into attacking our lab. And it's going to be super, super fun. This is my favorite part of the course. So let's go ahead and move into the next video. We're going to start talking about physical Active Directory components.